For many New Yorkers, we are living and traveling in a city and state that our forebears have built. As we think about the next 100 years of construction in New York, what does that look like? What does it feel like? How does it move? And it's the future, the next generation, that is going to build the New York of tomorrow.
Welcome to the next 100 years. Building the future of New York City starts today.
And the New York Building Congress is where the future is built.
With our centennial celebration behind us, we're turning our attention to the next century here in New York City, with 3 reports focused on policy, people, and projects over the next 100 years. But there's no denying there's a connection between all 3. Building the future of New York City will take cooperation and collaboration, just as we have done here at the Building Congress for the last 100 years.
By some estimates, 70% of the infrastructure that will exist around the world in 2050 has yet to be built. No government can fund that alone, which is why we need public-private partnerships and more innovative funding models.
We must also meet the challenges of climate change and urban expansion while integrating emerging technologies. To bridge the past with the future, we must focus on resiliency, sustainability, and accessibility for the next century.
It's been a decade since Superstorm Sandy leveled New York, causing almost $70 billion in damage. We have begun to rebuild our waterfront and coastline with an eye toward weathering the 500-year flood. We have created more green space and moved critical infrastructure to higher grounds. We've already imagined 3D printed seawalls to protect our coastline.
But our work is not done. Further inland, we've seen the devastating impacts of flash flooding that turned our roads into rivers and our subways into canals, which is why we must continue to focus on our infrastructure's ability to withstand the natural elements.
The benefits we generate through investments in resiliency will help our city function more effectively, which is why we must take a data-driven approach to development that can adapt to changing conditions.
With current and emerging technologies, imagining the next 100 years creates endless possibilities. But we must make sure that new developments will reside in harmony with the natural surroundings and look at building from a social, economic, and environmental perspective.
Even today, we can imagine living buildings, buildings that breathe, buildings that heal. And we will design the buildings of the future with a focus on sustainable materials and green energy. Utilizing recycled materials and natural resources like solar power and stormwater, we can create energy-positive projects to help halt the path of climate change.
When it comes to transportation, we're already seeing the move towards electric vehicles, while autonomous cars don't seem that far off on the horizon. And as our cars change, so will our roads, capturing the mechanical energy of our vehicles to charge our cars as we, or they, drive. But how long until those cars become airborne? Driving on a grid that seems like something out of the Jetsons. One day, someone at the New York Building Congress will be able to answer that question.
When it comes to public transportation, we've already begun to reimagine the subway of tomorrow. We've redesigned our subway entrances for greater accessibility and mobility to meet peak demand. We have laid out plans to build the Interborough Express, joining Brooklyn and Queens, with an expansion to the Bronx next. We must also enhance our subway to connect New York City's state-of-the-art airports with the entire city, allowing visitors from around the globe to experience all that our 5 boroughs have to offer. We must continue to build our bridges and tunnels to connect the outer boroughs and greater New York City area, making the greatest city in the world more accessible than ever before.
And as innovation solves the problems of today, new challenges will arise, like creating a stable housing plan to make sure home development is not outpaced by a growing population.
We will need a future workforce ready to tackle those challenges. That starts today, by investing in STEM education and supporting institutions that prepare our engineers, designers, and laborers of tomorrow to meet the demand.
While all these initiatives may seem daunting, over the next 100 years, the Building Congress will meet these challenges together, just as we have done for the past 100 years. Because the New York Building Congress is where the future is built.